Welcome, everyone, to Buddhist Center. My name is Jeff Allen, as you know, and tonight we're talking about Lama Tsongkhapa's foundation of all good qualities, source of all my good, begging for a mountain of blessings. And we're so fortunate that we can look at this text and compare it to the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment and the great treatise on the stage of the tantric path to enlightenment and all of Lama Tsongkhapa's other works and all the commentaries, and look at the Indian Pandits' works, and we can see the entire path to enlightenment is infused into this very, very short poem. And it's so wonderful that over and over again, we can look at it, try to get a little bit more each time that we do look at it out of it, because it truly shows us how to shape our day after day after day after day, to take the kind of days that we have, which we are inhabitants of our cyclic existence of our samsara, and that take that kind of day where everything's contaminated and being forced on us without freedom, to a day where we would have a complete freedom and a complete bliss, because we will have removed the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience that keep us from being in that state. But until then, we have to practice the pathway that will lead to those goals, because I think everybody would agree, if there is a way to no longer have to be fearful again, no longer have to suffer again, and no longer be blissless again, then it would make sense, because I would think you would want those kind of qualities of fearlessness and bliss to engage in the causes that bring about that state. So before we get started and get into any of the main body of the teaching, let's get into the 7-point Vairocana posture that we've gotten into so many times, where we put our legs in the preferably Vajra posture, half Vajra, cross-legged, legs on the floor, whatever is we're able to do. Right hand on the left, back straight, vertebrae like a stack of coins, shoulders in a comfortable position with arms bowed out, head slightly tilted forward, eyes slightly open, pointed at the tip of our nose, and then our mouths in a comfortable position, kind of resting, our tongue resting on the top of the mouth with it against the teeth. So we have our legs, our hands, our backs, our shoulders, our head, our eyes, and our mouth, making for the 7-point Vairocana posture. And then sometimes it says 8 points, and we add the breathing. So here we're going to just have a little bit of a taste of how we would get into a fixed meditation, some options that we could use for fixed meditation. So let's begin, as we always do, with breathing in and focusing only on that, and breathing out, focusing only on that, counting that exhale, focusing only on that, and then adding one more focal object, the front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni, or whatever deity you would choose to usually use in your meditation. These are all just suggestions. So we're imagining this front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni, in the case that we're explaining, about an arm length away, eye height, size of our thumb, 2 inches or so, in a static form, beautiful and radiant, golden, however you would normally visualize Buddha Shakyamuni. But in this case, we're going to make sure that our visualization is a static visualization, where there's no animation or movement or anything like that going around. So we're going to be focusing on this kind of soul object of Buddha Shakyamuni while we're focusing on the breathing in and out and the counting. And we can, if it's too much for us, not use the image, just do the breathing in and out and the counting. And if the counting becomes too distracting, just focusing on the breathing in and out. But we're going to make sure that we've now told our mind that we're going to focus on something. Whatever the thing that you land on based on this explanation, you're going to try to get your mind only to fix itself on that, with a state of clarity and a luminosity that isn't dull at all. So we're going to, while we're breathing in and out and counting and focusing on that front generation aspect of Buddha Shakyamuni, we're going to have that little spy of introspection in our mind, making sure that things are going the way that we planned, not the way that our mind normally is out of control and doing whatever it kind of wants, going here to attachment, pushing away things that we're angry with or have aversion towards. We're going to tell our mind that this is what we're focusing on, and those other things are going to be constantly removed. So when we're doing the breathing in and out and the counting in the front generation form of Buddha Shakyamuni, and we're focusing only on that spy in our mind of introspection is saying, hey, are we staying on that focal object. Mindfulness is not forgetting the object of observation, not forgetting the object. And is that working out for us? We're kind of making sure, without so much of a tightness, Lama Tsongkhapa says, that we're obsessed with the exact details of the image. And we once we get the image to the point where we're not going to really be able to get it any more detailed, we should be satisfied with fixing on the image in that way. So in the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, it's very clear that it can actually become a big distraction if we're so obsessed with every intricate detail of this front generation that we're spending all of our time trying to paint in little parts of the picture that will, in time, as we get more and more fluent in this practice, just naturally become part of the entire visualization as our mind is able to hold on to the object better and better. So when we say we're checking our minds to make sure with this introspection, checking our minds to make sure that there isn't any kind of scattering going on or dullness going on, scattering or excitement or dullness or lethargy, we're not doing this to the point where we're looking for the clarity of the object to be perfect and then causing this to be an obstacle. So it's kind of like a going back and forth that we have to do, but we have to be able to rest on something sooner or later. And that's the whole point of it. And as we're able to rest in a better way, more and more and more on the object will naturally, as we get closer to the ability to hold it in a single pointed way, the clarity will come. As the calmness comes, the clarity will come kind of as these two kind of are part of the stages of the shamatha practice as you go through it, where you get to this point of, not only the stability, but the clarity of stability, and then eventually of physical and mental pliancy, coupled with this kind of clarity and stability and so forth that arises from this equanimity state at the end into a state of like a shamatha, a calm abiding. So let's try and, play with some of the techniques that the great masters have taught. The great masters have taught that we get into the 7-point Vairocana posture in order to clear our mind, in order to be in the best suitable physical posture to be able to gain insights into meditation, and making our mind as clear as possible from using a physical support. And then we're going to from that physical support, try to practice some of the techniques that would allow us to actually get to the point of shamatha, this calm abiding that we know we're going to need if we want to see emptiness directly, because we have to first, before we directly perceive emptiness, have a union of this calm mind with the insight, with the wisdom, with the object of observation, emptiness, that we've, refined more and more and more, and through our studies come to understand more and more and more. And eventually that understanding that we have in a clear way, the object of negation is so clear, the negative phenomena of emptiness that we're meditating on is so clear in terms of its actuality, in terms of what we heard, and then we analyzed it and came to a conclusion. A tenet means an established conclusion, a final conclusion. So hopefully, if we've done our homework correctly, we land on the final conclusion of Nagarjuna in terms of our wisdom. So that wisdom, that object of observation, that emptiness that we're meditating on, that we're having this calm mind look at, is correct. So we have to make sure that we are not getting a very, very calm mind that can single-pointedly focus on something that's incorrect. Because a very, very calm mind can focus on something that's incorrect. So we have to have this union of this meditation process that we're getting more and more refined, but also our intellectual studies that we're refining more and more and more. And then the analysis of what we're studying that we're refining more and more and more. And then we're using the mirror of the Dharma. We're looking at the different pandits' assertions and seeing whether or not our view tallies with what their assertions are, and if we're at the point where we say, yes, I understand what this view is, I understand what Nagarjuna is speaking of, I understand what Chandrakirti is speaking of, then we have a true object of observation. We have the proper object of negation, which is the inherent existence of all phenomena that we can look at very, very carefully, closely, stably, clear, with luminosity, so that we can eventually then unite those two to the point where we are able to have this kind of direct perception of emptiness and become bodhisattvas on the grounds once we have that direct perception of emptiness. So all of these techniques that we're doing are not just in the talk that I'm giving and saying the same things over and over and over again, aren't just for the point of amassing knowledge, aren't just for the point of saying, okay, I have a general gist of how to glance through some of these stages. Therefore, establishing more and more tools in your toolbox to be able to do the only thing that will give you freedom, and that's see emptiness, according to Shantideva. The only thing that will allow you to have the freedom of whether it's an abiding nirvana of a hero solitary realizer or a non-abiding nirvana, the Buddha's state of foe destroyer, Buddhahood's nirvana, whichever one, you're going to have this very, very clear understanding of emptiness, and emptiness, which is the actual emptiness, the actual ultimate truth, the final ultimate truth, because not the final ultimate truth is the wrong object of observation. And if you aren't pointing at the correct object of observation, then who knows where that will lead you to, but it certainly will not lead, well, we know it will lead you to more cyclic existence, more samsara, where though, who knows, but we know that it won't lead to that final place where there is no more suffering, and at the best level, where you're the most reliable guide in the universe and you dwell only in a state of bliss. So these introductory techniques of the 7-point Vairakana posture, and the breathing in and out and the counting and holding an object, and thinking about Buddha nature, and thinking about the Four Noble Truths, all of these things are tools that we use to incorporate throughout our day. We incorporate throughout our day to make sure that our minds are in a constant state of change in the correct direction, because our minds are always changing from moment to moment to moment, but we can kind of manipulate the way that our minds will be progressing. So the way that we're thinking is going from moment to moment to moment, and generally speaking, we're thinking about this, then thinking about that, and then thinking about this. But if we can direct our minds on a daily basis, more and more frequently, then our minds aren't as apt to go here and go there. They're going to go exactly where we tell them to. And we know that virtue causes happiness, non-virtue causes suffering. And if we're able to really hold on to throughout our day a mental state, a mindfulness that isn't forgetting that virtue causes happiness and non-virtue causes suffering, we're able to hold on to that, and we're able to be less distracted, then we're going to be more apt to engage in those things which will bring about the results that we want. So let's practice a little bit about what that would look like on our daily basis, and what are some of those tools. So we're going to breathe in and out, we're going to count, we're going to hold the Buddha Shakyamuni's image in front of us. We're so fortunate that we have this human basis. We have the opportunity to practice the Dharma. We have the opportunity to change our minds. We will all become Buddhas, just like Buddha Shakyamuni did. Buddha Shakyamuni is so kind to have come into our world and presented us with a path. a path that will allow us to, as he did, get rid of our afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience, those things that keep us from being completely reliable in the universe to everyone. We're so fortunate that we have an entire path that's been presented before us, that's been put into our hands by great masters like Khyentse Geshe Wandak and His Holiness the Dalai Lama. We're so fortunate to have met with kind beings like this. Buddha Shakyamuni came 2,600 years ago, and we're a part of an incredible family, an incredible lineage that traces back to Buddha Shakyamuni and all of the pronouncements of Buddha Shakyamuni. We have teachers who can explain to us what was definitive and what was interpretable. We're so fortunate to have heard the 3 turnings of the wheel of Dharma. The first turning of the wheel of Dharma, where Buddha Shakyamuni taught the 4 noble truths in Varanasi. We're so fortunate to know the truth of suffering, truth of origin, truth of cessation, and truth of path. And then the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom, where we have that very condensed form, that Heart Sutra, that turning of the wheel of Dharma, where Buddha presented the ultimate truth, the lack of objective existence, the lack of intrinsic existence, inherent existence of all reality, and the bodhisattva paths that would lead to the complete extinction of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience. We see that Buddha was so kind to us to give us a staircase to first understand our suffering and what causes it, and give us the kind of hope that we could get rid of it and know a path to practice it. Know that we need to engage in the 3 highest higher trainings in order to achieve a complete freedom from the truth of suffering. And know the exact wisdom, because of the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, that we need to have when Buddha taught the Heart Sutra and Rajagir to those bodhisattvas, and talked about the exact wisdom that we would need in order to get rid of the origin of suffering. No matter what our goals are, whether they're the goals of the here and solitary realizer, whether we just want an abiding nirvana, or we want to achieve complete Buddhahood, we're going to have to rely upon the emptiness that was taught in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma. And then the Buddha was so kind to engage in the third turning of the wheel of Dharma, where he differentiated between the first and second turning of the wheel of Dharma for those who were confused, to try to give kind of a middle path between the 2 views that were pointed out. Taught the mind-only school view, but also taught about that clear point of Buddha nature, that all sentient beings have this nature of the Tathagata essence. We have this gold, this treasure that's buried way beneath the ground, but if we dig it up, we can have the realizations, because the mind is empty of inherent existence, and because our mind can proliferate, our mind can mature into the state of the purity, into the state of the pure mind that the Buddha has, in terms of having removed the adventitious defilements. We can also remove the adventitious defilements because our mind is in the nature of clear light. Our mind is in the nature of an unsullied state. All we have to do is remove the defilements, remove that which is sullying it, and have the ripening paths of all of the accumulations and all of the purifications and renunciation and bodhicitta, and combine it with the wisdom realizing emptiness. And it's because of the fact that we have Buddha nature that when we combine those pathways, we can achieve the state of omniscience, perfect wisdom, perfect compassion, perfect love, perfect power, perfect skillful means. And it's because we have Buddha nature that we will all become Buddhas. So fortunate. Rejoice in the fact that you will become a Buddha, and you will become a Buddha very quickly, because you have all of the stages of the path right in front of you that will be needed to accomplish that goal. You're not missing anything. You just have to put it into practice. Now imagine from the static state of Buddha Shakyamuni that Buddha Shakyamuni becomes very animated, very happy, quite impressed that we're engaging in a teaching of the Mahayana. Not so many complete practices will be taught by all of the Buddhas, and we are engaging in a teaching on the Mahayana, and a teaching which also includes the Vajrayana teachings. The source of all my good not only creates the sutra path, but also teaches the tantric path. And we're so fortunate that we're being able to hear about this, and we have this in our world. We've had teachers who have taught it to us, and the Buddha is so pleased that we're engaging in complete paths, because we know that no matter what In order for us to completely remove the obstructions to omniscience, we will have to engage in the practice of the completion stage of the tantric path. And we have all of these stages that are being presented to us in the source of all my good. Rejoice and be so happy about that. And Buddha Shakyamuni is so happy that we're engaging in a complete path and that we've, taken all of the full advice that he has given, because we're listening, we're engaging and hopefully getting the wisdom arisen from hearing analysis and meditation on the topics of the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, and the teachings for beings of great capacity, not only the perfection vehicle, but the tantric vehicle as well. So fortunate to be able to have these teachings in our world, where we're able to meet with them in a complete way, not missing anything whatsoever. And because we have this Buddha nature, the Buddha knows that the teachings that he gave were not for nothing. The teachings that he gave were for the purpose of all beings achieving the aims of fearlessness and infinite happiness. So Buddha Shakyamuni is so happy. Now imagine that Buddha Shakyamuni has been containing the entire merit field, and imagine that there's an explosion like fireworks in the space in front of you. Buddha Shakyamuni is animated, but now all the gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas are in the space in front of you, imagining His Holiness the Dalai Lama, smiling and so happy. Khensur Geshe Wandak, so many of us were so connected to. He gave us so many teachings over and over and over again, and tried to make it so that every day we could change our minds and move closer and closer and closer to that complete state of Buddhahood. We're so fortunate that we met with this teacher, imagining Khensur Geshe Wandak, imagining Geshe Lobsang Gompo and the previous abbot, Gen Losang Gyatso of Drepung Losang Ling, who's passed on, imagining him, Demalocha Rinpoche, imagining Geshe Dorje Damdu and Umzala Geshe Aga, imagining Geshe Mala Tenzin Ladrin and Ani Thupten Chodron and Jeffrey Hopkins, all of these kind beings who have illuminated the path for us, who've come into our world and been so kind to take their time to present us with an unerring path, a path that has no partial instructions, a path that has complete instructions. Now imagine that the extensive deeds lineage is illuminated in the space in front of you, passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Maitreya and Asanga and Basu Bandhu and Dharmakirti and Dignaga and Vimuktasena and Haribhadra and Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, imagining Lama Limpa there. We're so fortunate. And Lama Atisha, we're so fortunate to meet with these teachings, the teachings for beings of three capacities, that Lama Atisha was able to compile and show us how all teachings are instructions for practice. All the teachings on the grounds and paths and logic, and the teachings on virtue and non-virtue and the illumination of the Abhisama Alamkara we find in this extensive deeds lineage. And we're so fortunate. Imagine all these holy beings that are there in the space in front of you. These beings that we're so connected to because we're connected to Lama Tsongkhapa and the great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and Lama Atisha's teachings that are like, it says, like an ocean that combines all of the illustrious instructions. So we find the extensive deeds lineages so important in our understanding. Now imagine the profound view lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri, Arya Nagarjuna and Chandrakirti and Arya Deva and Buddha Palita and Chandrarashita and Baba Vega and Kamala Shila, all of these holy beings, again, Lama Salimpa holding both of these lineages of bodhicitta, and Lama Tisha combining all of the lineages of not only bodhicitta, but the lineages of understanding of bodhicitta and the profound views, emptiness understanding, that complete understanding of the lack of objective existence of all phenomena. We're so fortunate that Lama Atisha has come into our world and then passed it down into this unbroken lineage to us, where we can understand how to combine the extensive deeds lineage and all of the practices of the grounds and paths and logics and so forth, and use this as a foundation to understand that all those grounds and paths and all that logic and so forth is empty of inherent existence, is empty of objective existence, intrinsic existence, because Arya Nagarjuna was so kind to us and because Atisha was combining all of these lineages. Now imagine the lineage of blessings in the space in front of us, that incredible lineage passed down from Vajradhara and Mahara and Saraha and Matripa and Marpa, and Tilopa and Naropa and Marpa and Milarepa and Gampopa, the incredible Lam Ring text that Gampopa wrote. We're so fortunate that we have all these teachings in our world, imagining that Lama Atisha, who's passed down the lineage to Drone Tompa of the Lam Rim and the three Kadampa lineages, and then imagining all the holy beings of the Nyingma, Sakya, Kaju, and Galupa lineages, Padmasambhava and the Karmapas and Sakya Pandita, Lama Tsongkhapa, Kirtup Jay, and Jelsop Jay, imagining Basuchiji Jetson and Jayan Sheba and Jayan Gapi Lodru, imagining Gonchu Jimmy Wombo and Jayan Rupi Dorje, all of these holy beings that we're so connected to, the seventh Dalai Lama we've been spending time with these days, and we're so fortunate these beings came into our world and were so kind to us to pass this down to us. Imagining the highest yoga tantra deities, yogic tantra deities, performance tantra deities, action tantra deities, imagining all of the 35 Buddhas in the space in front of you, 35 Buddhas with that incredible, powerful purification, just by saying, I prostrate to Buddha Shakyamuni, this conqueror, just by saying the first name of the 35 Buddhas of confession, we can get rid of eons of non-virtue. Imagining all of the protector deities, the small scope, medium scope, and great scope protector deities, Vaishravana, Dharmapala, Mahakala, imagining Palden Lamo, all of these holy beings are in the space in front of you. Leaving out no beings that you consider holy shouldn't be in the space in front of you. So everyone, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, all the holy beings in the space in front of you. Kensur Geshe Wandak, so happy that we're carrying on these teachings in a pure way. We're not letting Lama Tsongkhapa down. We aren't embarrassing Lama Tsongkhapa. We're teaching in a way where we're trying to really integrate these practices and see that no teachings are contradictory. Everything's an instruction for practice. We can easily understand the conqueror's intent. And by way of understanding this in a complete way, we won't abandon the Dharma. So these beings are so happy that we're engaging in the practices which will lead to actual Buddhahood without leaving out any of the steps, without making up things from our own side that won't actually work. We're engaging in a tried and true path that's been presented and passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni through all of the Nalanda masters and the great Tibetan masters, and then to us from the kindness of our lamas. Now, we recognize that we want to be free from suffering. We recognize that all of the 8 types of suffering, the suffering of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and meeting with the unpleasant, and separating from what is pleasant and not getting what we want, and the suffering of the appropriated aggregates, the suffering of rebirth, the suffering of uncertainty and insatiability, having to shuck off these bodies over and over again. This will be a body that we just shuck off. When we'll shuck it off, we have no idea. And then we will go to the higher realms sometimes and the lower realms sometimes, but all the while circling in the various types of suffering. Among the 3 types of suffering, the 6 types of suffering, and the 8 types of suffering, we'll have to have the suffering of change, and the pervasive compounded suffering. No matter where we are in cyclic existence, the pervasive compounded suffering is the suffering that Buddha said that is the most horrifying thing, because it means that it keeps going, that we'll be forced into a set of appropriated aggregates again and again and again, because of our contaminated karmas, afflictions, and their seeds, being forced. And the Buddha said that lack of freedom is misery. And we're currently in that state of misery because we're forced into this aggregates. I have the physical and mental suffering of these aggregates. So we recognize that we're in this current situation that's so clear to us. And it's from that recognition of this current situation that we're in, and the understanding that we have to get rid of what causes it. We have to get rid of the origin of suffering in order for us to be free from it, and understanding that we have to understand the emptiness of the consequence school to cut the root of cyclic existence, to have the liberating path, to get rid of our suffering altogether. And if we only get rid of our suffering, yes, we can achieve fearlessness. We can achieve a complete state of freedom from suffering, but we won't have achieved all of our own aims. We won't have achieved the state of perfect wisdom, perfect love, perfect compassion, perfect power, perfect skillful means, because it's only the Buddha that achieves that state. And just by getting rid of the afflictive obstructions, by relying on, meditating on the abandonment of our own suffering by only relying upon a path for ourselves alone, we won't be able to achieve the complete state of Buddhahood. We won't be able to achieve bliss. We won't be able to achieve infinite happiness. Yes, we'll be able to achieve fearlessness. Yes, freedom from suffering, but we won't be able to achieve bliss and infinite happiness because we won't have removed what keeps us from that state. And what keeps us from that state are the imprints of the afflictive obstructions, those imprints that are still lingering of the subtle self-cherishing attitude. And if there's a subtle self-cherishing attitude and there's these imprints that are left over from the afflictive obstructions, then we can't achieve the state of Buddhahood. The only way that we can achieve the state of complete Buddhahood and fulfill all of our own needs in a complete way is to fulfill not only our needs, but all sentient beings' needs in a complete way. So Buddha has shown us so clearly how to do this, and we're so fortunate. When the Buddha taught the perfection of wisdom, the Buddha implicitly also taught all of the bodhisattva paths, all of the understanding that we have to achieve the path of accumulation and generate from a dull capacity the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and then have a union of calm abiding and special insight on the path of preparation, and then see emptiness directly on the path of seeing and become a bodhisattva on the first ground, and then refine that understanding more and more and more of emptiness to the point where we get rid of the afflictive obstructions and the obstructions to omniscience through the 10 bodhisattva grounds. But those 10 bodhisattva grounds are rooted in this love and compassion, this idea that I will take on myself the task of freeing all sentient beings. I will become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we recognize that this desire to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings that comes from the recognition, the realization that we must cherish others' needs more than our own, and couple that incredible, beautiful mind with the wisdom realizing emptiness. And if we can do that, we will not only achieve the liberation or the certain goodness Nagarjuna talks about of a hearer and solitary realizer, which is an abiding nirvana, which they achieve through the various levels of stream enter, once returner, never returner, and arhat, we will also be able to achieve the arhatship of complete Buddhahood. The foe destroyer, the bodhisattva has destroyed not only the foe of the afflictive obstructions, but also the enemy of the obstructions to omniscience, which keep him or her from being the most reliable guide in the universe. So we must generate in our mind, as it says in the source of all my good, this aspiring bodhicitta first, where we want to become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. So we say to ourselves, may I become a Buddha for the sake of all sentient beings. And right now I'll do what I can to try to help all sentient beings. The entire merit field is still in the space in front of you. And now imagine that you start to bring every single sentient being to this teaching so that they too can have a shot, can have the chance at becoming the Buddha that everyone will become as quick as possible. So we imagine that we grab all the hell beings, all the hungry ghost beings, all the animals, all the humans, all the demigods and gods, leaving out none. We recognize that every single sentient being since beginningless time has had so many different relationships with us. They've taken care of us when we were so vulnerable. And now we can do something for them. The only thing we can really do for them is lead them to the teachings, because we know the Buddhas do not wash away. Even the Buddhas can't wash away our negativities with water. Even the Buddhas can't take away our suffering with their hands. Even the Buddhas can't transfer their realizations to us. It's by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. And we're bringing all sentient beings here to be able to hear the truth of suchness, to be able to hear what the ripening paths and the liberating paths are that everyone will need in order to completely achieve the state of Buddhahood, because we will not settle for anything less. We look at just an abiding nirvana as a place that would be almost like a jail we would abide in, where we would have to then wake up from when the Buddha comes to us and says, you're not done yet. You haven't gotten rid of the obstructions to omniscience yet. And it's like it says in the text that we have to cross another river again. And we've already achieved a state of cessation at that point of all suffering, but we still have those subtle imprints, those stains left over. So we're fortunate that we've brought all sentient beings here in order to hear the teachings of the Mahayana, and all the gurus and bodhisattvas erupt with a state of bliss. So imagine that now everyone's here, all sentient beings are here, all the gurus and bodhisattvas are here, and with that, let's recite, for more motivation purposes, the 37 Practices of the Bodhisattva by Jose Tome Zampo. So 37 Practices of a Bodhisattva by Jose Tome Zampo. Namo Lokechesvara, You see that all phenomena neither come nor go. Still you strive solely for the benefit of being. Supreme Guru and Protector Avalokiteshvara, to you I continually bow with body, speech, and mind. The perfect Buddhas, the sources of benefit and happiness, arise from practicing the genuine Dharma, which in turn depends on knowing how to practice. So I will explain the Bodhisattva practices. So it's so important to know how to practice. We can have a bunch of scattered intellectual ideas, but if we don't know how to put them into an order, one by one, first, second, third, fourth, if we aren't clear on what that order is, then we're not going to get to the destination of Buddhahood. We might get to a destination of suppressing certain emotions, but we won't get to the destination of the abandonment completely of those destructive emotions and the abandonment completely of the obstructions to omniscience that keep us from bliss. Now that you have obtained this precious human rebirth, the great boat so difficult to find, in order to free yourself and others from the ocean of samsara, listening, reflecting, and meditating with diligence day and night is the practice of the Bodhisattva. Passion towards friends churns like water. Hatred towards enemies burns like fire. Through the darkness of ignorance, one forgets what to adopt and what to reject. To abandon one's homeland is the practice of a bodhisattva. Giving up inhospitable places, mental afflictions gradually decrease. With no distractions, virtuous activities naturally increase. When mind becomes clear, conviction in the Dharma is born. Therefore, seeking solitude is the practice of the bodhisattva. Friends and relatives acquainted for a long time will separate. Possessions gained from exertion will be left behind. Consciousness, a guest, will leave the guest house of the body. To let go of this life is the practice of the bodhisattva. When due to friendship with someone, the three poisons increase, degrading the activities of listening, reflecting, and meditating, and destroys loving kindness and compassion. To give up such a friendship is the practice of a bodhisattva. When relying on someone, your negativities diminish and your positive qualities grow like a waxing moon. To cherish such a spiritual friend more than your own body is the practice of a bodhisattva. Themselves captives in the prison of samsara, whom can the worldly gods protect? Therefore, to seek refuge in the three jewels, who do not betray you, is the practice of a bodhisattva. The suffering of the lower realms, so difficult to bear, is what the Buddha taught to be the fruit of negative actions. Therefore, even at the cost of your life, never to commit negative actions is the practice of a bodhisattva. Happiness in the three realms, like dew on a blade of grass, is subject to instantaneous fading away. To strive from the supreme state of liberation that never wavers is the practice of a bodhisattva. From beginningless time, your mothers have cherished you. If they suffer now, what good is your own happiness? Therefore, in order to liberate an infinite number of sentient beings, cultivate bodhicitta is the practice of a bodhisattva. All suffering comes from yearning for your own happiness. The perfect Buddhas are born from the intention to benefit others. Therefore, to truly exchange your own happiness for the suffering of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. Even if someone driven by excessive desire steals all your wealth or incites someone else to steal it, to dedicate this to this person, your body, possession, and all your virtues of the three times is the practice of a bodhisattva. If someone cuts off your head, even when you have not done the slightest wrong, through the power of compassion, to take your misdeeds upon yourself is the practice of a bodhisattva. Should someone slander you and proclaim it in a billion worlds in return with a loving heart, to proclaim their good qualities is the practice of a bodhisattva. If in the midst of a crowd, someone exposes your hidden faults and abuses you for them, to bow to them with respect, seeing them as a spiritual friend is the practice of a bodhisattva. If someone whom you cherish as dearly as your own child takes you as an enemy, then like a mother who loves her sick child, to love that person even more is the practice of a bodhisattva. Even when someone who is your equal or inferior, driven by arrogance, seeks to disparage you, to place them on the crown of your head with the same respect as you would accord your guru is the practice of a bodhisattva. Though gripped by acute poverty and constantly scorned by others, stricken by terrible illness and possessed by evil spirits, to take upon yourself the negativities and suffering of every being and never to get discouraged is the practice of a bodhisattva. Though you may be famous and prominent, someone to whom others bow, though you amass riches like that god of wealth, to see that worldly splendor has no essence, and thus to be without arrogance is the practice of a bodhisattva. If you have not pacified the enemy of your own anger, combating outer opponents will only make them multiply. Therefore, with the army of loving kindness and compassion to tame your own mind is the practice of a bodhisattva. Sensual pleasures are like salt water. the more you partake of them, the more your craving will increase. Therefore, when something arouses attachment, to abandon immediately is the practice of a bodhisattva. All appearances are your own mind, and mind itself primordially transcends all mental fabrications. Knowing this and to remain free from apprehending the signs of subject and object is the practice of a bodhisattva. When you encounter objects that please your mind, like rainbows in the summer season, though they seem beautiful, not to view them as real and to give up attachment to them is the practice of a bodhisattva. All suffering is like the death of your child in a dream. To take such delusive appearances as real, how exhausting. Therefore, whenever you encounter unpleasant circumstances, to see them as deceptions is the practice of a bodhisattva. If those who aspire to enlightenment willingly give up their bodies, what need is there to mention material objects? Therefore, with no hope of reward or benefit, to give with generosity is the practice of a bodhisattva. If lack of discipline prevents you from benefiting yourself, then your wish to benefit others is just a joke. Therefore, to observe discipline with no longing for worldly existence is the practice of a bodhisattva. For a bodhisattva who seeks a wealth of virtue, every perpetrator of harm is like a precious treasure. Therefore, without feeling irritation towards any, to cultivate patience in the practice of is the practice of a bodhisattva. If Shravakas and Prachika Buddhists who strive for their benefit alone exert efforts as if to extinguish a fire burning on their heads, to cultivate joyous effort, the wellspring of positive qualities is the practice of a bodhisattva. Special insight, perfectly endowed with shamatha, completely destroys all afflictions. Knowing this and cultivating meditative concentration that transcends the four formless states is the practice of a bodhisattva. The practice of the first five perfections, but without wisdom, cannot achieve perfect enlightenment. Equipped with skillful means and cultivating the wisdom of non-conceptualizing the three spheres is the practice of a bodhisattva. If you do not analyze your own faults, you might put on a dharmic facade while behaving in a non-dharmic way. Therefore, to continually analyze your faults and then discarding them is the practice of a bodhisattva. If compelled by your own afflictions, you speak of the faults of other bodhisattvas, you yourself will degenerate. Therefore, never citing the faults of those who have entered the Mahayana path is the practice of a bodhisattva. Desire for gain and service leads to mutual arguments, and activities of listening and reflecting and meditation decline. Therefore, to relinquish attachment to the household of friends, relatives, and benefactors is the practice of a bodhisattva. Harsh words disturb the minds of others and degenerates a bodhisattva's conduct. Therefore, to give up harsh and unpleasant speech towards others is the practice of a bodhisattva. Once you become accustomed to afflictions, they are hard to undermine with antidotes. Therefore, the remedial weapons of mindfulness and introspection to forcefully eliminate afflictions such as attachment the moment they arise is the practice of a bodhisattva. In brief, wherever you are, whatever you do, always examine the state of your mind continuously, working for the welfare of others is the practice of a bodhisattva. To dedicate the merits thus accumulated through these efforts towards enlightenment with the wisdom free of concepts of the three spheres in order to eliminate the suffering of all infinite beings is the practice of a bodhisattva. By relying on the words of genuine masters, I explain the teachings taught in sutras, tantras, and treatises in the form of these 37 practices of a bodhisattva to benefit those who wish to train on the bodhisattva path. Because my intelligence is less and my learning is meager, I lack linguistic skills to please the scholars. Yet, since they're based on sutras and the teachings of genuine masters, I believe these practices of a bodhisattva are flawless. Nevertheless, since the vastness of bodhisattva's conduct is difficult to fathom, you, someone like me with an inferior intellect, I pray to the genuine masters to consider with patience all my flaws, such as contradictions, incoherence, and so forth. By virtue of the merit gathered here, and by the power of conventional and ultimate bodhicitta, may all sentient beings become like the benefactor Avalokiteshvara, who dwells neither in the extreme of samsara nor in that of solitary peace. You see so many of the stages of the path presented in there, and the reinforcement of the renunciation and the ethics and everything that the bodhisattva still has, which we find as the foundation practice for the bodhisattva conduct in the teaching shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity. We see how these teachings are indispensable if we want to achieve the higher realizations. And if we try to skip around and take it like a buffet of just doing the practices that we like and the practices that we want, we won't be able to really achieve the higher realizations, because the higher realizations are set on this foundation that's like bedrock. So Let's read the Heart Sutra. We'll do it in English today because it opened up to English, so that seems reasonable. Major planning, pre-planning. So once again, the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, where the Buddha taught the final view of emptiness, the Madhyamika Prasangika view of emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena, not the lack of existence. The Buddha just said the way that things exist are not the way that you perceive them to exist. They seem to exist in a way that has inherent existence, that has a subjectness to it, that can be found from its own side. It seems like things have something more than what we make them into. But the Buddha said, no, they don't. There is external phenomena, but that external phenomena is merely causes and conditions and collections that we then bring into being as this or that through nominal designation, through some sort of concept, through meaning and sound generalities and so forth, that we put together. We create this picture with the name of what this thing certainly is. And then after we come in contact with it, we then pay attention to it. We discriminate it as this or that and decide whether it's good or bad. And then we have a feeling that kind of comes about that this is good, this is bad. And then it shapes our intention. We push away from what we don't want and we run towards what we want. And the Buddha said that in the second turning of the wheel of Dharma, things are not abiding the way that we believe them to be abiding. We are making this all up in terms of the way we're experiencing our external world. And the more and more that we can step back from this misperception, and we can start to have a realistic understanding through having the wisdom arisen from hearing and hearing that, oh, okay, so we're saying that the self of person doesn't have this true existence. Oh, and the self of person, when we look at person, we see that we have this kind of name, if we're looking at it at the highest level, of person that is Jeff. But Jeff is merely a label that's placed on a bunch of aggregates, a bunch of parts, a bunch of physical and mental parts that are just kind of a collection that come together that seem to have this intrinsic existence, this objective existence in and of themselves, but then somehow reify this idea that there's this singular I, Jeff, that is separate from or is the basis of or is dependent on, or there's some way to find this Jeff that's separate than, that is this collection. There's just all these different things that when we start to logically look at the possibilities, we find out that we're kind of believing in, that there's some Jeff that has this separateness, that has some kind of autonomous nature, that has some kind of permanent nature, that has some kind of findableness, that doesn't require all of this other stuff in order for it to come into being, that Jeff doesn't require the environment around Jeff for Jeff to say, I'm this human being that lives in this house. All of these things come into kind of this big collection that Jeff then puts a name on. This is mine, this isn't mine, this is my house, this is Jeff's house. And then this entire ego is created, this entire I is created that can be grasped at as having this trueness to it. But this sutra tells us that not only the self of person doesn't have this inherent existence, but the self of phenomena doesn't. There is no ness when we look at it in a reasonable way, that our self or of person or phenomena has. It's merely collections and labeling and a show that's going on that my mind is projecting, but it all seems so real that it makes me act and react in ways that aren't realistic in terms of the way I should react based on the way things are truly abiding, their true mode of subsistence. The true mode of subsistence of Jeff, the person Jeff, and the true mode of subsistence of everything else that isn't person, is we believe has some sort of concrete nature that it doesn't. And this Heart Sutra smashes that concept and tells us that these things, this person that we protect so much and we cherish more than others, isn't findable in the way that we think it is. And all of these things we chase after aren't findable in the way that we think that they are. And it's all merely a projection, but this projection is creating existent phenomena, but just that it doesn't exist the way that it appears, that we're merely creating it. There's a subjective conventional existence that can say, yes, there's a plant over there that exists, and there's a chair over there that exists, and there's a sandal over there that exists. But that sandal, that chair, and that plant doesn't have any inherent existence, any objective existence that's findable from its own side, without relying upon the subject just to take a collection and then name it as whatever my karma and a whole bunch of other complicated factors are causing me to make it think it appears as having objective existence as. So I name it as if it has something just to name out there that has that nessness to it. That means that that should be what I name it. And it, because it has this kind of permanent, unitary, autonomous nature as this or that. So I don't see the connection between my kind of understanding of the reflection that I'm creating through my imprints. So the Heart Sutra is telling us to smash this self-grasping ignorance that gives rise to the inappropriate mental conduct, that then gives rise to the afflictions and gives rise to the contaminated karmas and gives rise to all of cyclic existence. And in this Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, it exposes the fact that all of this phenomena around us in its conventional sense is concealing, is deceptive, is deceptively concealing its true nature, and that's its emptiness of inherent existence. There's a concealment going on. This microphone is now just being labeled and projected by me as this is a good microphone, better than the old microphone. And I believe it has a better than the old microphone-ness from its own side. But it's merely this karma that's allowing me to be a human that uses a microphone, and this naming and this projection and so forth that's bringing it into being as this or that. But it doesn't have that objective existence from its own side. So this Heart Sutra helps us smash that idea. And then implicitly within it, when we see the paths of Teata Om, Gate Gate, Paragate, Parasangate, Bodhisoha, it shows us that in order to not only get rid of the ignorance that grasps at things as being inherently existence that will get rid of our afflictive obstructions, we need to rely upon the fruitional paths of the Bodhisattva, the path of accumulation, the path of preparation, the path of seeing, the path of meditation, and the path of no more learning. So let's recite the Heart Sutra. Was it clipping? The Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge. Thus have I heard. Once the Blessed One was dwelling in Rajagriha at Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a great gathering of the Sangha monks and a great gathering of the Sangha Bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi that expresses the Dharma called profound illumination. At the same time, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, while practicing the profound Prajnaparamita, saw in this way. He saw the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, how should a son or daughter of noble family train who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita? Addressed in this way, Noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, said to Venerable Shariputra, O Shariputra, a son or daughter of noble family who wishes to practice the profound Prajnaparamita should see in this way. Seeing the five skandhas to be empty of nature. Form is emptiness, emptiness also is form. Emptiness is no other than form, form is no other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness are emptiness. Thus, Shariputra, all dharmas are emptiness. There are no characteristics, there is no birth and no cessation. There is no impurity and no purity, there is no decrease and no increase. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no perception, no formation, no consciousness. No eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no dharmas, no I, dhatu, up to no mind, dhatu, no dhatu of dharmas, no mind consciousness, dhatu, no ignorance, no end of ignorance, up to no old age and death, no end of old age and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, and no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since the bodhisattvas have no attainment, they abide by means of prajnaparamita. Since there is no obscuration of mind, there is no fear. They transcend falsity and attain complete nirvana. All the Buddhas of the three times by means of prajnaparamita, fully awakened to unsurpassable, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the great mantra prajnaparamita, the mantra of great insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequal mantra, the mantra that calms all suffering should be known as truth, since there is no deception. Prajnaparamita mantra is said in this way: Teyata om gate gate paragate parasangati bodhisoha. Thus, Shariputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, should train in the profound prajnaparamita. Then the Blessed One arose from that samadhi and praised noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, saying, Good, good, O son or noble family, thus it is. O son or noble family, thus it is. One should practice the profound prajnaparamita just as you have taught, and all the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One had said this, Venerable Shariputra and noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, that whole assembly in the world with its gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas rejoiced and praised the words of the Blessed One. The Facebook's off. Aga samara jachandara samara yabe deata ongate gate paragate parasangate buddhiso bobo concesso jikai dimidujishi lobodoji mibodoji shewadoji jagi baji medubishi tanji shedin goriya so ha gerin donja jeju shewadan midun bejan dandra wadan dumba dumjin bunzun dunjoji daji dejan denda delejo. Now make an outer mandala offering as a request for teaching. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. Holy Lamas high, wrap the sky of your Dharma bodies in massive clouds of knowledge and love, and let them pour upon the earth of your disciples as we are ready, a shower of rain, the teachings deep and wide. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Through the merit I create by teaching the Dharma, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sanje Jadan Zoji Janana Janju Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Chushe Jipe Sonanji Drola Benja Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jadan Zoji Janana Janju Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Chushe Jipe Sonanji Drola Benja Sanje Jubajo Sanje Jadan Zoji Janana Janju Badu Dani Jasuji Dagi Chushe Jipe Sonanji Drola Benja Sanje Jubajo. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. The one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings, the teacher, Sugata, and protector, to you I make prostrations. The one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays. To you, the Buddha, I make prostrations. So those two salutations. So the first salutation Enthused by great compassion, you taught the immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. That's from Nagarjuna's Mulya Madhyamika Karika. It's the final verse. So we see when we speak of, the profound view lineage, we say from Buddha Shakyamuni to Manjushri to Arya Nagarjuna. One of Arya Nagarjuna's most important works is the Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way, the Mulya Madhyamika Karika. And this is the final verse of homage that's made right at the end of that. It's the concluding verse of the Fundamental Wisdom of the Middle Way. And then the one who is transformed into the reliable guide, motivated by altruism to benefit sentient beings. That particular homage that we read was written by Master Dignaga in the Pramana Samuchaya. And then Dharmakirti came about 100 years later and wrote the Pramana Vartika Karika and read this homage verse in Dignaga's text on valid cognition and thought it was so amazing that, as Geshe Dorje Damdu says, he wrote many, many, many stanzas in the second chapter of the Pramana Vartika Karika about it. And one of the stanzas is the one who has eliminated the web of conceptualizations and is endowed with the divine bodies of the vast and profound, who eternally shines forth the forever noble light rays. To you, the Buddha, I make prostration. So that's from Dharmakirti. So we say, when we talk about the extensive deeds lineage, we talk about Vasubandhu and Asanga, but we also talk about Dignaga and Dharmakirti. Dignaga writing the Pramana Samuchaya and Dharmakirti writing the Pramana Vartika Karika. So just having some frames of reference for some of the prayers that we do at the beginning of class is good. And then when we think about that merit field and we think about the extensive deeds and profound view lineage, we can say, yeah, they really are touching our lives. We read their quotes. We, think about when Rinpoche ever established, how we have previous lives. He would always go right to Dharmakirti to show that this moment's consciousness from a previous moment's consciousness, and the breathing in and out from a previous breathing in and out, and the sense powers from previous sense powers, and so forth. So that would come right from the Pramana Vartika Karika, where we find that things don't come out of nowhere. They come from concordant causes. They come from things that are of a similar class. So this is the point that's being made in there. And let's see. So then, if you're attached to this life, you're not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Okay, so where we left off last time, we were talking about aspiring bodhicitta. And we were at the stanza. Let's read up to that stanza and see what we can do tonight. I hope everybody's having a wonderful evening. The source of all my good. So Babunka Rinpoche, of course, has the 4 categories of the outline. We're into the second category of the outline. First category is meeting with a spiritual teacher, which is covered by this stanza. And then what you do once you meet with a spiritual practitioner, and you take the essence of this life by engaging in the practice of the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. So the source of all my good is my kind Lama, my Lord. Bless me first to see that taking myself to him in the proper way is the very root of the path, and grant me then to serve and follow him with all my strength and reverence. Bless me to realize that the excellent life of leisure I found just this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. Grant me then to wish and never stop to wish that I could take its essence night and day. So here we use poems and texts like the source of all my good as a roadmap for our day. So we wake up in the morning and we recognize that we have this human basis. So we wake up with a sense of gratitude, a sense of gratitude for, yes, we've met with incredible teachers. So we have these instructions, we have this human basis that we can do something with. Bless me to perceive that this excellent life of leisure I found this once is ever so hard to find and ever so valuable. So as we become more and more accustomed to these practices, this becomes more of our mental state, and if we have no matter what kind of dreams we've had, hopefully we get to the point where our dreams are our practice. We're practicing in our dreams. But for someone at my level that's not practicing in my dreams yet, I try to wake up, and because of Rinpoche's kindness, and because of the years I have in the Dharma, I really do. I think first about, the teacher, and have some kind of, idea around that. And then I say, you got to get up. You've got to do something here. You have this human basis. You need to take the essence of this life, do something with it that's good. And then I really immediately try to think about, because I don't know when I will have time to do it again. And I don't know when I'm going to die. Again, death will come and nothing can stop it. We don't know when. The seventh Dalai Lama says, we don't know if we're going to be alive later this evening. We can't say that for sure. And the only thing that will help is Dharma. And if there's a chance I may not be alive later this evening, it's already kind of later for me. I go to sleep pretty early nowadays. It's pretty late, later this evening, I may not be alive. If the only thing that can help me is practice, then I should try my best to integrate that kind of concept into my day so that I'll have that help when I die of my practice. So this is the whole point of this, is it's not just words. They aren't, oh, yeah, we've heard this a million times, understand there's persons of three capacities, small, medium, and great. But what that really means to our day matters. How we approach those three capacities on a daily basis really matters, because those three capacities are the entire path to Buddhahood. And if we are not approaching parts, looking at all the different parts, I have this human basis, but unfortunately I'm going to die. And what happens when I die? And, who is a reliable guide? And then you go for refuge. All of these stages that are found in the Lam Rim were so kindly put in an order so that we know exactly what we have to do with our mind in order for it to evolve. Because just scattered a little compassion and then maybe a little suffering. I was listening to Geshe Pende and Losa Ling, who's down in Drepung, Atlanta, incredible teacher, the other night. And he was laying it out so clearly, the same way we talk about it, that if you don't meditate on suffering and the causes of suffering, if you aren't, as Venerable Rabina Corton says, tasting your own vomit, understanding that I have all of these 8 sufferings and 6 sufferings, I have these 3 sufferings. And if you don't have this disgust, if you're not disgusted with the state that you're in, then there won't be the motivation to engage in the heavier practices. And most of the compassion will be biased compassion. You'll maybe be able to do some good things for the world here and there, but those good things for the world here and there aren't necessarily pathways, if they're not dedicated, if they're not focused on the right purpose, to you having freedom, you having infinite happiness and bliss. They could just be used up into a nice ice cream cone later on in your future lives. You're maybe generous to someone and think that you're engaging in this huge Buddhist practice. And then in your next life, maybe you have a nice cake, a cake that then will also be a form of suffering, because it will transform into that. Maybe it's too much sugar for you, or maybe, I can't take another bite of cake. That cake that was so delicious, that you thought was so great that you got, it's just a form of suffering because it's contaminated happiness within cyclic existence. So if we aren't really focused on why we're doing what, and we're not directing why we're doing what to certain, if we're not directing what we're doing to really specific goals with a basis of understanding of why we're doing them, then it's just doing this and that and here and there. And buffet Buddhism, although it's interesting, doesn't serve as an integrated path. You have to have that staircase that leads to complete Buddhahood. You have to have the staircase of Teata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasangate Bodhisoha. And for the Bodhisattva, that first Gate is the path of accumulation, the Bodhisattva of dull capacity, that at the path of accumulation, who hasn't seen emptiness yet or anything, is getting the bodhicitta. Even the Bodhisattva of sharp capacity, path of accumulation, is getting bodhicitta, because they, even if they've seen emptiness already, they still have to be, have this realization of the mind that aspires to enlightenment, that we've talked about so much. But these teachings are for that point. These teachings are to say, okay, so the teachings for beings of small capacity, this going for refuge, this reliable guide, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm praying to some external God who I'm taking refuge in? No, I'm taking refuge in the words of the Buddha, what the Buddha has said, what the Buddha has presented to me as a pathway to Buddhahood. So by me going for refuge, I'm saying that I'm following in what I believe is the only way to freedom and bliss. So I believe that you're the only one in the universe because I've checked, not because I'm guessing, not because the Buddha has nice statues at TJ Maxx. No, because I've checked to see whether you are the reliable guide or not. At the beginning of the great treatise on the stage of the Tantric path, there's that great quote that says, I'm not angry at Kapila. Kapila is non-Buddhist school. A lot of the Samkhya tradition, the enumerators and so forth. I'm not angry with the Kapila. I'm not wicked into Buddha. It's not like Buddha's only my hero. I'm into truth. And wherever that all shakes out, that's what I will go for refuge to. I go for refuge to truth. I go for refuge to what is the accurate view of reality. So we have to figure out what that accurate view of reality is. And once we figure out that this accurate view of reality that's been presented by the Buddha seems like the most viable option, then we're going for refuge to this Buddha, Dharma, and the Sangha, because we know that the Buddha is someone who's gotten rid of all the negative qualities and only has excellent qualities, has gotten rid of the afflictive obstructions, gotten rid of the obstructions to omniscience, and we want to do that. So the Buddha, because of great compassion, came and told us how to do that. So we're going for refuge to this being because we know that they've arrived at the destination that we want to arrive at. So they're the real map quest. They're the true, on your app, when you look at maps and directions, they're the one who will really be the one that you click on that will get you to the destination of complete Buddhahood, because they've achieved the destination of complete Buddhahood. And that's why they are the reliable guide, not because they look like they are, because you've investigated what a reliable guide would be like, where you're trying to be guided to, and so forth. So putting these things into practice and thinking about them and analyzing the topics allows us to have a firm understanding in, okay, and if this reliable guide says from virtue comes happiness, non-virtue comes suffering, then I need to modify my behavior, because when I die, the things that will come behind me are the karmas that I've created. My body and the life in it are fleeting as the bubbles in the sea froth of a wave. Bless me first, thus to recall the death that will destroy me soon, and help me find sure knowledge that after I've died, the things I've done, the white or black, and what those deeds will bring to me, follow always close behind, as certain as my shadow. Grant me then to be careful to stop the slightest wrongs of the many wrongs we do, and try to carry out instead each and every good of the many that we may. So here, this is a conclusion that we're making because we recognize that the Buddha is omniscient, the Buddha is a reliable guide, that all causes create things, and results are dependent upon their causes. So if we want the result of happiness, we have to create the causes of happiness. If we want the result of suffering, which I don't think you do, we have to create the causes of suffering. If you want bliss, you have to create the causes for bliss. The Buddha goes from bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss because the Buddha only in his or her mind stream has the causes for bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss. We have the causes for suffering, and then a little bit of kind of contaminated happiness, and then, extreme forms of suffering and so forth. We go from that to that to that to that. The suffering of change and the pervasive compounded suffering and the suffering of suffering. We jump from, lily pad to lily pad, whereas the Buddha jumps from fearlessness to fearlessness to fearlessness to bliss to bliss to bliss, because the Buddha only in his or her continuum has the causes for the ripening results that dependently originate into bliss to bliss to bliss, fearlessness to fearlessness to fearlessness. So bless me to perceive all that's wrong with the seemingly good things of this life. I can never get enough of them. They cannot be trusted. They are the door to every pain I have. Grant me then to strive instead for the happiness of freedom. We see the things that it says right here, it's talking about among those 6 sufferings, the fact that we don't have this certainty that within cyclic existence, where, our friends become enemies, enemies become friends, strangers becomes enemies and friends. And since beginningless time, we've had all of this uncertainty going on. And then it says, I can never get enough of them. The second of the 6 types of suffering, the insatiability. We can have everything that we want, but we're never satisfied. This is the true illness, the Buddha said. This is your true illness. You can get everything you want in cyclic existence, and you'll still have this lack of satisfaction. It can't be trusted. All these things that you think will make you happy can't be trusted. They're the door to every pain that you have, because we know that all, relationships end in separation. All of these things that we think within cyclic existence make us happy change into a state of suffering. They are the suffering of change. They can't be trusted. They're the door to every pain I have. Grant me instead to go run after something that actually works. Liberation, the happiness of freedom. Instead of running after this and running after that, let me run after something that actually causes true happiness, a happiness that isn't contaminated, a happiness that doesn't change into suffering, a happiness that will always be happy, a happiness that goes from bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss to bliss, and doesn't have these negative states that we're just become so accustomed to and so satisfied with. It's saying, don't be satisfied with that, because there's something that is so much more satisfying all the time that you can achieve, and you can achieve fearlessness. So grant me then to strive day and night to want to have freedom, because freedom is a lack of misery, because not having freedom, Buddha said, is misery. And fearlessness comes from not having the fear of the suffering, the 8 sufferings, 6 sufferings, and 3 sufferings. Having to be fearful that you'll be thrust into something else you don't want. Grant that these pure thoughts may lead me to be watchful, to recall what I should be doing. Grant me to give the greatest care to make the vows of morality the essence of my practice. They are the root of Buddha's teaching. So here it's showing that in the teaching shared in common with beings of medium capacity, that this section ends here, that you have to develop the 3 highest higher trainings. And the foundation of the 3 highest higher trainings is ethics. So we know that ethics, concentration, and wisdom. So we need that foundation. That's like, if you want to cut down a tree, that's like a strong body, and concentration being like a good arm, and then the chainsaw being like the concentration being like a good arm, and then chainsaw being like a wisdom. And dependence upon ethics, concentration, and wisdom, you can cut the root of cyclic existence. And in dependence upon a good body, a good arm, and a chainsaw, you can cut the root of a tree. So this example is used by Buddha. I have slipped and fallen into the sea of this suffering life. Bless me to see that every living being, everyone my own mother, has fallen into. Grant me then to practice the wish for enlightenment, to take on myself the task of freeing them all. So here, this is the aspiring bodhicitta that we talked about when we looked at Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. So we know that we have the physical base that's needed. We're a kind of being that can get aspiring bodhicitta, and a kind of being that can get engaged bodhicitta, because we found out that when we look at base, there's physical and mental base, and then in the 6 realms of cyclic existence, all of these realms have a physical base from which you can get this aspiring bodhicitta. That we know that Buddha in hell achieved bodhicitta for the first time when he went to help someone he saw who was having a hard time with a cart, pulling a cart. And we know there's many examples of nagas who get aspiring bodhicitta and so forth. So we've seen all of these examples in scripture that say that we have the kind of base, we're not in hell, but if we were, we could get aspiring bodhicitta. We aren't nagas, but if we were, we could get aspiring bodhicitta. But we're humans, and we're in a basis that the bodhisattvas in the high pure lands pray to have, because we have this pleasant mix of suffering, but not so much suffering around us. We can hear about suffering, we can know about these things, and we can transform our minds, because we know that our Buddhahood will be dependent upon other sentient beings and helping them. And we have them here. And we are them, and we have the 8 leisures now, so we can practice. So we have this incredible basis from which we can practice. And then the mental basis we know that we're going to need in order to get aspiring bodhicitta is faith in the Buddha. So we have to establish that the Buddha is a reliable guide, compassion that's using sentient beings as its object of observation, and a perseverance that's willing to endure hardship for the sake of others. The hardship that a bodhisattva would need, and then faith. So we see that these are the general mental base points that are needed in order to become a bodhisattva. And we see that the compassion focused on sentient beings is obviously needed. When we look at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we find the detail of compassion right after love through the force of attraction. And then when we look at equalizing and exchanging self with others practice, in the Tonglen practice, the giving and taking practice, we find compassion. And compassion is wishing that sentient beings are free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So we have this idea that is focused on all sentient beings, that all sentient beings have freedom from suffering and the causes of suffering. So we have to have all of these conditions present within our mind in order to develop the realizations that we talk about. And the last thing I want to talk about, I just wanted to touch again on Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection and that mental base that was going to be necessary in order for us to just kind of remind ourselves what it will take in order to become bodhisattvas. It doesn't just happen from nowhere. And we know that first we get renunciation, and then from renunciation, that is a desire to definitely emerge from cyclic existence. This disgust with cyclic existence. This, first you have this disgust with the lower realms, the worst kinds of sufferings. Then you get a disgust for all of cyclic existence. And from that disgust with cyclic existence altogether, you say that, man, everyone else should really be disgusted with cyclic existence. And you start to figure out a pathway that would make you the most reliable guide to show them why they should be disgusted with cyclic existence and how to get rid of the cyclic existence they're disgusted with. So it's all necessary for us to build up and build up and build up. And it's, as it says, awakening the lineage of the great vehicle, being taken care of by a spiritual friend who teaches the great vehicle, being under the influence of love and compassion, and being and enduring a hardship for others. These are all the causes, and seeing the inconceivable power of the bodhisattva. You want to be a bodhisattva because they're so incredible. And you repeatedly hear the teachings about Mahayana over and over again. And this just inspires you so much, makes you say, man, I really want to become this bodhisattva. And it's not just, oh, that's really great. Like there's someone who I could never be. It's saying, I want to be just like them, and I can become just like them. And saying, and not being able to bear that the Mahayana teachings would decline, and saying, I must be a being who will uphold these Mahayana teachings. And seeing how rare it is when we look at, how many billions of beings there are, how rare it is that one would be able to actually practice bodhicitta. So here are some of the points that are made in Panchen Sonandrapa's general meaning of perfection. And then how do we then, as I said last week, how do we take the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, and then combine it with the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. So there's a way to synthesize the methods, and I want to finish aspiring bodhicitta tonight. So I'm just going to go through the synthesis. So when we look at the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment, we see that there are 6 causes and 1 result. First, and there's a pre-cause, right, of equanimity that's not included in the 7-point cause and effect. So the 7-point cause and effect starts with the pre-cause of equanimity. Then there's 6 causes and 1 result of bodhicitta. The 6 causes: remembering all sentient beings are your mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay their kindness, love through the force of attraction, great compassion, the extraordinary attitude, and then the result of bodhicitta. Then the method for equalizing and exchanging self with others practice, there's 9 points that can be made. First, the equalizing self and others, that all beings are as important as I am, making an equal point, reflecting on the demerits of self-cherishing, reflecting on the merits of cherishing others, taking on the suffering of others, giving happiness to others, the actual exchange where you say, I'll put them before myself, the actual special recollection we do of the kindness of others, that interdependence that we have with all sentient beings, how everything that we have is because of them, and then developing that idea, that extraordinary attitude, that altruism that says, I'll take on myself the task that I can't yet, and I must become a Buddha. And now that ninth step of the equalizing, exchanging self with others becomes bodhicitta. Now, the way to put them together, just for anybody who's taking notes or not taking notes, you go back and listen to it, is you start with that pre-step of equanimity that isn't in the 7-point cause and effect, but it's the pre-step for the 7-point cause and effect. So you develop this equanimity that has an equanimity in relation to friends, enemies, and neutrals. Then you start with the remembering that all beings are your mother, your brother, your sister, whatever person who's taking care of you when you are most vulnerable. In this case, we say all sentient beings have been your mother. So there's 2. And then we remember the kindness just as normal. And then you wish to repay the kindness. And then after that, you switch over to that equalizing, exchanging self with others practice, where you have equalizing self with others, recognizing that all beings are equally important. Then look at the downfalls of the self-cherishing attitude. Look at the benefits of cherishing others. And then you do the Tonglen practice, taking on the suffering and giving happiness. So that's 8 and 9, taking on the suffering and giving happiness. Then the actual exchange where you put others' needs before your own, that's 10, okay? And then the special recollection of the kindness of others, number 11, saying, oh, all sentient beings have been so kind. I'm so dependent upon all sentient beings. And then you have the extraordinary attitude. I will take on myself the task of freeing every single sentient being from suffering. I'll bring sentient beings to a state of happiness where there are causes of happiness only, and a state of being where they're free from suffering and they only have, the causes of suffering removed. So I'll do that. I'm going to take on myself that task. May the Gurus, Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas please bless me to be able to do this. And then you say to yourself, I can't. I must become a Buddha. And that's the result. So that's number 13, the result of bodhicitta. And this is aspiring bodhicitta, which we all can get because we have a human basis. We have the 8 leisures. We've met with all of the teachings. We've met with the Mahayana teachings. We've met with the teachings shared in common with beings of small and medium capacity, which will allow us to then generate bodhicitta from. So we have no excuse but the fact that we haven't practiced enough and we haven't realized this mind. So we have all of the tools. We have the lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Lord Maitreya Sangha of the 7-point cause and effect for realizing the mind that aspires to enlightenment. We have the lineage passed down from Buddha Shakyamuni to Nagarjuna and then to Shantideva and so forth of the equalizing and exchanging self with others practice. We have the Lamrim tradition that shows us how to combine the both. So we have absolutely no reason why we can't achieve this incredible mind state. And next week, we'll talk about engaged bodhicitta. We'll talk about the bodhisattva vows, because that's the next verse that Pabunka Rinpoche will get into. If you're attached to this life, you are not a spiritual practitioner. If you are attached to samsara, you have no renunciation. If you're attached to your own self-interest, there is no bodhicitta. If there is grasping, you do not have the view. Thank you so much for everyone for listening. Enthused by great compassion, you taught the Immaculate Dharma to dispel all perverted views. To you, the Buddha Gautama, I pay homage. So let's do the concluding prayers. Concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this is a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Zandrapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. Any mistakes that I have made, may they be purified by Vajrasattva's mantra, imagining that white light rays and nectars transform into ohms and purify our body, red light rays and nectars transform into ahs and purify our speech, and blue light rays and nectars transform into hums and purify our mind. And these are all coming from Vajrasattva, who's inseparable from our root deity, inseparable from Kensar Geshe Wandak. Om Benza Sata Samaya Manupalaya Benza Sata Seno Vajista Didame Baba Sutogaya Me Baba Subhagaya me Bhavan, Ragda me Vasavasiti me Bracha, Savakamas, Tuchame, Kitam Shian Kuruhum, Ha Ha Ha, Bhagavan, Savatatagata, Benzama me Moka Benza Bava Mahasamaya Zava Ahom Fate. May Lama Tsongkhapa's teachings remain in this world. Mime Zewe Tuchin Genrezi, Jeme Jeme Wam Bajame on the Vomali, Jim Zaveda Ganjing Bizojin Zakabalas and Jabi Jala Zoa de. May we always be protected by Paul and Lamo, who Rinpoche said is our protector deity. Jorama 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 Jinjagala Jorama Jinjo ruler Hongjo Hongjo Rama Jorama Jorama Jinjagala Rachimo Rama I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri. Likewise, Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme. By all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times, I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all powerful Avalokiteshvara, Tenzin Gyatso, may you stay until samsara's end. And the prayer for Kensar Geshe Wandak, a complex yogi poses as a simple monk. Homage to Kensar Geshe Wandak, our precious spiritual friend who is inseparable from Aryatara. I fully prostrate, covering as many atoms of the earth as possible to your pure body, speech, mind, and enlightened activities. I offer to you drinking water, bathing water, flowers, incense, candles, scented water, food, and music purified by Om Ahom. The rarity of having 1 million wish-fulfilling gems is a common occurrence compared to meeting with a holy teacher like you, who placed the complete path to Buddhahood in our childlike hands. Just like Atisha, who came to Tibet with the lamp to dispel the darkness of ignorance, you, kind abbot, arrived in the West with a lineage purer than a diamond and begged us never to be satisfied with partial instructions. The teachings of the extensive deeds and profound view lineages flowed from your lips like nectar for our ears that elucidated the teachings for beings of 3 capacities. Now the sound is stopped. All composite things are impermanent. You told us that all of your teachers passed away, and understood this sadness, entreating us to continue our studies. The Buddha does not wash away the negativities of beings, nor does he remove their miseries by his hands. His spiritual realizations are not transferred to them. It is by teaching the truth of suchness that beings are liberated. We are not prepared to take this difficult journey to the highest goodness of Buddhahood without your continued guidance. The sadness in our hearts would be too overwhelming. May you swiftly return to this world and take care of us in all of our lives, wherever we may be, never leaving our hearts and crowns. May all sentient beings perfectly realize renunciation, bodhicitta, and the correct view of emptiness, so they know who you really are. Thank you, everybody. So we'll get into the Bodhisattva vows. Maybe we'll read through all the Bodhisattva vows next week and start to get a handle on what it would be like, what kind of behavior we would need to have if we had renunciation and then suddenly became bodhisattvas. What were the vows that we would take? What is the behavior? How would we behave? So we'll talk about that next week.
Jeff,
yes.
Just if people want the Rinpoche prayer, it's on the Buddha's website, buddhacenter.com, website. So it could be looked at and while we do the prayers together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Buddha's Center has also now obtained, because of Umzala Aga, he's so busy, but he ran around Delhi because I asked him to find a stupa for us, for Rinpoche's remains. So now we have one. I don't know how we're going to get it here. We have 2, actually, one like maybe this big and another smaller one. Very, very beautiful stupa that he's going to send me all the things to fill it with and work with me on the radio. It's not a radio, it's a cell phone on WhatsApp, and show me, and anyone who wants to put prayers in. I know that others have mentioned they want, and Priscilla, you mentioned you wanted to write prayers to put into it. Now we'll have the opportunity to do that as well, and we can roll them on the incense and put them into the stupa. And it'll be wherever Buddha's center is, that stupa will be here. Yeah, I'm so grateful for Umzala Aga. He looked all over Dharamsala, and then he looked all over Delhi, and he had absolutely no time. You saw him on stage chanting for Dalai Lama. And he's so kind to all of us and so kind to keep teaching me. He was debating me on actually the 7-point cause and effect and equalizing, exchanging self with others, and gave me a moment whether those 2 paths are contradictory or not, because they have the same result. So anyway, you can all think on that. Have a good one.